So I'm a big fan of J.R.R. Tolkien's. I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think it's one of the best trilogies ever produced and made. I was okay with the Hobbit movies. It does have its own issues, i.e. being rushed into production and being forced to be made. But I still like part 1, and I still like pieces of 2, and I like the end of 3. I also like all his books. I've read them several times. I usually try to read them once a year. So yeah, this document or this biopic sounds right up my alley. I'm talking about the latest movie. It's called Tolkien.
All I can discuss today. Listen, that's all you can. But don't. No.
Okay, Tolkien is quite simply a biopic about him. The framing device for the movie is J.R.R. is in the middle of World War I, stricken with trench fever, while he goes out to look for one of his friends. While that is going on, he will flash back to growing up, meeting these 3 other gentlemen with who he befriends in middle school, who end up being lifelong friends, and all of them going into World War I with him. Along the way, he meets his wife. And throughout it, you see how he kind of constructed the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books. I really like this movie. I know a lot of people. I'm on my own on that one, but I enjoyed it. I like Nicholas Hoult. Nicholas Hoult, I think, was really compelling in this role. He had the right amount of charisma and the right look for this character, who Tolkien, as he grew up, was someone who was not only very smart, but he was also huge into language, which is how he created the Elvish language and the Dwarf language for his books. And it goes into how he met his wife, and who's played by Lily Collins, and they have crazy chemistry together. There are at least 2 scenes that were on their own really compelling. There's a scene where they're in a alleyway dancing to an opera that's being played, and there's a scene where they're inside a tea room that is just magnetic. If you'd have told me they were in love in real life, I would have totally believed you there. That scene was really good and charming, and they just have the right chemistry to work off each other. A lot of the movie is about Tolkien and his friends and how he got the rebellious spirit. Also about how they pushed each other to become great. They all went to Oxford College, of course. You know, I like the war scenes. The war scenes are really good. For being a low-budget movie, this movie only cost about $20 million to make. And by the way, this is produced by Fox Searchlight, who also gave us films like The Shape of Water, which is less than $20 million, and that movie looked great. But I like the war scenes in this movie. Yes, there are subtle hints, or not so subtle hints, to him and what he would create later on. But the movie I never felt like the movie was knocking me over the head. Except for like once, and there are a couple of bad jokes. When Edith, his girlfriend at the time, is talking with his friends the one time they get to meet each other in the movie, she talks about how she likes different composers. And one of the friends goes, "Oh, who wants to sit and listen to, or no, who wants to sit and hear about someone with a ring for 6 hours?" And I was like, I get it. The Lord of the Rings longest joke. There are a couple of them, but I think they're done a lot more subtly than the ad campaign would have you believe. Because the way that this movie was marketed, at least from the trailers I got, is that, oh, this represented this represented this, and so. And it would have you believe that, like, he's writing the book. But it's not. The whole thing is he's in the middle of war and he's having a fever dream. He has trench fever. So a lot of that stuff can be conducive to that. You know, there are scenes where he'll see mist moving around, and he will, you know, he'll start envisioning like black horsemen and things like that. But once again, it could be a fever dream. It's not necessarily, oh, this is what he came up with, let me write the book right now. It's not like that. It's pretty much told like that. It's just a guy who's going insane, trying to find his friend in the middle of World War One, while he's suffering from sickness, and he's like remembering past events. I think a lot of people are getting down on this movie because the Tolkien estate has openly said that they are not endorsing this movie. And while that is a huge issue, especially if you are a Tolkien fan, they also didn't see the movie. I don't even know if they read the manuscript or the screenplay. So I think a lot of people are taking that as a negative against this movie. It is very formulaic. He falls in love. They have an issue. This is a biopic, so I'm not really worried that much about spoilers. They eventually get back together and stuff. But like I said, Nicholas Hoult really carries the movie very well. It might be long in certain places, but I didn't feel it. I enjoyed the way the storytelling was going and going back and forth between the war. And you can also see very subtle nods to characters. Like there's this one character who I was like, that's straight up Sam. But the movie never stopped to wink at you and tell you, he's the inspiration for Samwise. It didn't, and I really appreciate it. And I actually was waiting for that at one point during the movie. There is a not so subtle but beautiful scene where you can literally see him on the warfield, and it's the second to last scene that you see him in the battlefield, and you can literally see the smoke of war and what it's turning into, and just like him just standing there like watching all this mayhem with like mortar bombs. You have mustard gas bombs all over the place. Mines blowing up around, guns being shot, and it's really a beautiful shot. I actually want that for a screensaver. So I was pretty high on this movie. I give it an 8.3. I had a lot of fun. If you like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, I think you would really enjoy this. The chemistry between Lily and Nicholas Hoult was amazing. I thought it had the right mix of going back and forth between the framing device and the actual story itself. Yes, it was a bit formulaic, but I'm not going to kill this movie over that. I had a good enough time for it. So, are you going to see Tolkien? It's in limited release. It's only about 1,500 theaters this past weekend. It was actually supposed to be shown in less theaters this weekend and expand out over time. So I don't know how much more theaters are going to take this movie, but if you have a chance, and like I said, if you like Lord of the Rings, I would go out and see this movie. Are you going to see Tolkien? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time.